Are you ready to become awesomer? Hello everyone, my name is Umar Hamid. I'm your host on the No Limit Selling podcast, where industry leaders share their tips, strategy, and advice on how you can become better, stronger, faster. Just before we get started, I've got a question for you. Do you have a negative voice inside your head? We all do, right? I'm going to help you remove that voice in under 30 days guaranteed. Not only remove it, but transform it. So instead of the voice that sabotages you, there's one that propels you to much higher levels of performance and success. There's a link in the show notes. Click on it to find out more. All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the No Limit Selling podcast, where we interview amazing guests and try and figure out how they do what they do, how they grow their people, how they grow their revenue, and more importantly, how they grow themselves. Because one of the things that leaders do is they're always improving so other people in the organization can lean on their brilliance, their confidence, and their trust. And one of the projects that I'm working on is Project Happiness. And Project Happiness is designed to bring more happiness in the world. And one of the ways we're doing it is a very simple technique. We're inviting people to share videos with us. They're about 15 seconds in length, and it's basically someone saying, "Hi, my name is," I'm going to pretend to be Wendy. This was somebody who actually interviewed. "Hi, my name's Wendy. What makes me happy is making music because it allows me to express my soul." I mean, that's freaking beautiful. And the idea is someone who's struggling to find happiness can watch one of these videos. And one of those videos, because we've got hundreds of them, all of them are simple, achievable things you can do today. And the hope is someone will watch one of those videos and go, you know what? I could do that. And one of the things that makes me happy is talking to really smart people. And today, I have the privilege of having Ira Wolfe with us today. He's the head honcho at Success Performance Solutions. Ira, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks, Umar. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate it and love this conversation.
So one of the things that just happened, we tried recording this and the internet gods or the computer gods struck the laptop down. And one of the things great leaders do is adaptability, right? Stuff happens. What's that old saying? If you want to hear God laugh, tell him you've got a plan. And some people get crushed by failure when things go wrong, and other people take failure as feedback, and other people take failure as inspiration to keep going. So what is adaptability to you, Ira? How do you define it?
Yeah, thanks very much. And that's a favorite subject. My TED Talk, which was about 5 years ago, was focused on making change work for you. So,
nice.
And it took me down this rabbit hole of trying to research how does that happen. And then when 2020 hit, I was introduced to an adaptability model. It's called ACE, and we can get into the specifics of that. But it was really about, people were bantering around grit and resilience. Yes. Growth mindset, engagement, experience, all these things.
And it's really all once. I married her. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I won't go into that side. I had to repeat that a couple times. But we went through, which is adaptability, right?
Yes.
We all learned 2 years ago how resilient and gritty and opportunities that abounded because of the pandemic. Now, unfortunately, there was a lot of people who didn't adapt. There was a lot of, there's certainly a lot of people who fell ill, a lot of people who passed away.
So let me interject there just for a moment. One of the industries that was hit the hardest and it was going to be screwed and just be destroyed totally was real estate for 2 months.
Absolutely.
And then it came back. It's the strongest market they've had in 30 years. Like the first 2 months, everyone was crying, it's all lost. And then all of a sudden, people wanted to buy houses and there wasn't enough supply and house prices went skyrocketing, and realtors, that was the place to be during the pandemic because they made gobs of money. So it's a really good example of how many people quit the industry in the first 2 months and didn't stick with it to see something freaking amazing on the other side. So please go on adaptability. How do you take a situation where you got punched and not crumple to the floor or go, I give up and go somewhere else? What is the methodology you recommend people use to kind of go, all right, let me take a breath and take it away, Ira. Be brilliant.
The one thing that we need to put in perspective here is that grit and resilience for decades, for millennium, worked. It was, if you got knocked down, you got backed up, and you just stayed focused on your goal, on that future. You just kept going down. And we've rewarded that. We have a whole work system that's that hard work, that American capitalism,
Yes.
that work ethic is just be gritty. You people went to work day after day after day. They hated their jobs. You're talking about happiness. They didn't like their jobs. They basically lived to work. And we got down to that end of the rainbow. They retired. If they reached retirement, they lived for a handful of years and then they passed away. And we had, all those things going on. The challenge, not the challenge, but in those times, change happened relatively slowly. It
Yes.
evolved. And it took a long time for things to happen. If you and I go back and even look at some of the technology that arrived on the scene, a fax machine, arrived, and you could use the same fax machine for 20 years or even 30 years. I mean, it was just
True.
the same old thing over and over again. Now, if you buy a phone, if you buy a smartphone, it's out of date in 6 months.
It's true. But let's kind of go back to the earlier generation, the baby boomers. What they accomplished in the U.S., the U.S. went from like a country to like a superpower in all capitals. And so that grit and determination and work ethic, people did that for their families. And that's what you were supposed to do. That was the box you were in, and that's what you did. So they changed the world. But I agree. Change is happening really, really quickly. And even those guys would have been freaked out by change, because just human nature is change means I got to go out of my comfort zone, and people don't like doing that. So please go on. I just wanted to give a salute to the baby boomers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, each generation. I mean, Gen X has done really well. I mean, they helped us get there. The millennials gets bashed. I'm a recovering millennial basher, and the millennials are, really the reality is they're now in their 40s. The oldest millennials are now in their 40s, and they're some of the people leading the charge. And now, they're attacking the Gen Z, but that's a whole other story. But what behind the scenes, what we didn't realize was the rate of exponential change, how quickly things were happening. And then there were multiple events where in the past there might have been one event. We weren't so connected by the internet and globalization. Our economies weren't so connected. Our supply chains, just think about that. Our supply chains weren't connected because our challenge was getting things from Nebraska or California to the East Coast. Now it's getting things from China and India and Russia and South America.
And not only that, the butterfly effect is, if a butterfly flaps its wings on one side of the world, you get a typhoon. And that's true when it comes to supply chain, because everything is interlinked. If there's one chip manufacturer that can't do what they do, like what's happening right now, the auto industry, all kinds of things just grind to a halt. So yeah, now everything is super connected and super fragile as well.
So going back to that model that we talk about, where grit and resilience, and those were the two words of the year. Either every media, every consultant said the word of the year is grit, the word of the year is resilience, and absolutely true. What we didn't experience, what people didn't take into account was the speed of change.
Okay.
And literally overnight, March 11th, I believe was the date, which we just celebrated that 2-year anniversary, when everybody said, go home and don't come back. We'll be back in 2 weeks. No, it'll be 4 weeks. No, it'll be 3 months. No, it may be never. And you may never come back to work. You're going to have a job, but the job's going to be different. So all these things change so quickly. The missing piece there, and we look at our ACE model, which the A is is abilities. It's personal abilities. Grit and resilience are still key factors. We didn't take into account this thing called growth mindset. And for the listeners who aren't out there, if you have a growth mindset, is just as you introduced the show, is you seize opportunity. It's what mistake, what happened, and you and I will probably both reflect on that. What can we do differently next time? Or we've been through something like that already, and we look at that as a challenge. It wasn't a roadblock; it was a stepping stone into doing something different. So we actually, based on that, we actually changed the tone of our conversation. We seized on that moment. Fixed mindset is, oh my goodness, I'm just not cut out to do technology. I hate this Zooming stuff. I'm just not very good at figuring this stuff out. I just wish it could go back to the way it was. So fixed mindset is really challenged by challenges. Growth mindset looks at these as opportunities. They seize upon that. They grow. They learn. What can I do differently next time if this happens? And that's the path. Many people have this fixed mindset. I'm too old. I'm not very good at math. I'm not very good at technology. I don't like the way I look on Zoom. I can't possibly go on stage. I can't talk to other people, basically speaking, public speaking, this is just another variation of that. There's people that are terrified by that. And the reality is people have to come out of their comfort zone with all the changes, with all the strategies, with this, even talking about going to hybrid and remote work. Companies get stuck on the strategy, the technical side of that, and they don't take into account the challenge that people have implemented. Even if people want to stay, if I love my life. I love spending time with my kids. I don't have to do a 2-hour commute every day. I can do all these things. That's all the technical stuff. The challenge is having that mindset.
Ira, you said adaptability was really important. And one of the elements of that, you said, grit and resilience were important. And that's almost like the foundation you need to be adaptable. Because a lot of people, when something goes wrong and we fail, and God knows I've failed a lot of times, then it's like you pack up your bags and you go home, or it's like, oh, why does this happen to me? So explain the relationship of grit and resilience. Like, the illusion is, and it may be the truth, that we were grittier in the past and we're not as gritty now. So address that first. I'm not sure that's true or not. And then if you don't have grit, how do you get grit so you can be adaptable?
Yeah, and great question. So, are we grittier or less gritty? Every generation says the next generation is not as gritty as their generation. The circumstances have changed. If you look at the millennials, who certainly have been bashed, as I've said earlier, I'm a recovering millennial basher, is for their adult life, they've been through 9/11,
Yep.
they've been through 2008, they've been through a pandemic. They're pretty gritty to come out of this, and many of them are thriving. They're in their late 30s, early 40s. Many of them, they're the successful business owners. They're the entrepreneurs. They've done really, really well. So grit is really that perseverance. And Angela Duckworth, who really made that mainstream,
Yes.
talks about that a lot. And part of it, it's really difficult to say what do you need to do for grit, because it's so contingent upon resilience. Because if you get knocked down, you have to get back up to keep going, and the other components, things like mental flexibility and growth mindset.
So one of the things you mentioned was, what they've been through, 9/11. 9/11, they were really young, but I was interviewing the head of sales training at one of the universities. They've got a university course there should be a lot more of those, by the way. And he was talking about his current crop of graduates. And he goes, my current students are, and I was thinking, lazy, no good, terrible. And he didn't say that. He said, they're the most driven people I've come across in a real long time. And I said, hey, time out. What do you mean? Why did this happen? He says, when they were 7 or 8 years old, the 2008 financial crisis happened. Their parents were losing their homes. There was food insecurity, and they're basically depression era kids. And they're the most driven. They got to do it themselves. And so you're right. Going through those circumstances is where you get it. You can't get it in a workshop. You need to live through it and realize. There was a book from Marcus Aurelius, and his main point on the entire book, depending on whichever chapter, whether it was family, politics, finance, the end of the chapter was, at least you're not dead. So don't worry about it. Keep going. So Ira, talk about your ACE model. We got adaptability. What's the C?
So we have, the A is abilities. So there's 5 abilities that individuals need, and they all interconnect. So it's grit, resilience, growth mindset. It is mental flexibility, which is the ability to digest conflicting messages, which we have a lot, ambiguities, uncertainty. And it's also unlearning, because we're in a situation now. It's not just what do I need to learn, but what worked in the past isn't going to work in the future. And we need to also say, hey, that was interesting and helped me get here, but I can't keep doing that. And I've got to push that back. I got to file it away in my brain somewhere, or just do a brain dump. So the A is abilities. The C is character. Now, abilities we can change. They're skills. We can learn how to do that better. The character is our personality. And it's not that we're looking to change somebody's personality, but it is important to know how it impacts our outlook, our perspective to adaptability, to change readiness. And we look at things like extroversion. If I'm an extrovert, I need to talk to you. The pandemic was really tough on me. I needed to go out and socialize. Or we just had these big Zoom calls. An introvert is, I want to hide behind the screen. I don't want to be here. I need to process this. I'm okay being alone. Some introverts thrived during the pandemic because they were left alone. But it's not universal. But we look at that. We look at our ability to deal with emotions. Are we excitable, or are we also somewhat reserved? But we look at hope, how hopeful someone is. Right. And that has a lot to do with growth mindset. If you're a fixed mindset, you tend to be less hopeful, less happy. If you're growth mindset, you look at the world as a future. We look at motivating style. Motivating style is, do we play to win, or do we play to protect? And thinking style is, basically the ability, what type of risks are we willing to take? And do we see the big picture, or do we get buried in the details? So it looks at that and it just says, here's our personal approach, how we deal with this stuff. And is that going to help us grow, thrive, be successful? Or is it going to lead to our unhappiness and our burnout and pile on to distress?
In the work that I've been doing for decades, so let's take hopefulness. So you could have a human being that is not hopeful, but usually there's a belief in their unconscious that's causing that hopelessness. And we've got the ability now to go in and figure out what's causing that belief and transform it. So you'd be surprised how many times I've heard this. Somebody's in grade 4 and the teacher in the class says, you're not going to amount to anything. And it's like, what kind of evil psychotic teacher would do that to a kid in the classroom in a public setting? But in that moment, it creates a belief that I'm not good enough. And if you've got a belief, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But we've got the ability now to go in, identify what happened, change the belief around it. And you can take someone that was hopeless and make them hopeful. So there's hope for everybody to show up in your best self.
And you think about that, and Carol, and we'll go back to mindset, because that's my passion and that's where I look. And I think that's the root of a lot of this evil, coming out. It's certainly neurosciences and what we learned about it is so much deeper. But
and just to add to it, it's also our blessing, and it allows us to blossom. So mindset, it's just like a knife. It could be useful in a surgeon's hand and harmful in my hand. No, never mind. Please go on.
And I was on the other side of that first career. I had a lot of knives in my hands, and dangerous instruments, but that we use.
Were you a soldier, or what was the?
No, I was actually a dentist.
Oh,
my first career, I was a dentist.
All right, we're hanging up. Click. No, I saw Marathon Man. Please go on.
So when we go back to this root, this hope, which you talked about, when you think about. If somebody says you'll never be good enough, you're not smart enough, you're look at your color, all these things amount to that, and you start to believe those and you live to that. But if you look at our educational system, and this is where Carol Dweck's work started, is why do really, really smart people fail in life? Why do they become successful? And part of it is because you start to believe your own press. I'm really smart, so I don't have to work hard. I don't have to put any effort in, which then leads to the grit story. Why don't people push things forward? Because they were told from early on, you're just smart. It's just easy for you. But when you go to college or even high school, the fixed mindset stops taking courses that are challenging. Because what if I don't get that A? What if I don't get that 4.0? I will look stupid. I won't live up to my own press. So all of a sudden you stop challenging yourself and you just fall into this abyss of what we used to call normal, this abyss of this is what it is. That worked when the pace of change was slower, when you can get away with it, when there was such a thing as a 40-year career. Today, there was a study from Australia that came out, and they looked at young people. 17 careers, or 17 jobs, 5 careers.
Wow.
Over their lifetime. It used to be that, millennials, young people can't keep their jobs. They'll have 8 jobs over their career. Most baby boomers had 8 or 10 jobs over their career, but the last 30 years, they had 1 or 2 different jobs. Now we're not just switching jobs. We're literally switching careers. All that's changed in the background. We need people are going to need grit and resilience and a growth mindset and be able to deal with ambiguity and uncertainty. Those are skills we haven't taught. McKinsey just came out. Number one skill for employability, career satisfaction, life satisfaction, and making money.
Looking hot.
That wasn't on the list, but sort of it was. Self-confidence.
Yes.
Self-confidence was adaptability. It was the number one driver.
Nice.
Of that. Now, there were variations of that dealing with uncertainty and things, but basically it all had to do with adaptability. So we have the A and then we have the C. And then if you look at the environment, and the environment is going back to what we were talking about, is what our parents said, what our teachers said, what the government says, what the environment in which we live in. We're talking about business. Let's talk about the culture, the company culture. And that's really a terrible word. It should be community. It should be much broader than just having that culture, because you have culture, you just do the same thing over and over again. You hire people who look like yourself and fit the mold.
Oh, yeah.
But we talk about company support. That's one of the dimensions in the E, company support. Do the employees feel like management has their back? And I got to tell you, it's obviously from the Great Resignation and everything else, it's no. Clearly, it's no. The next part is team support, and that goes back to a lot of the work that Gallup did. Does a supervisor have my back? Do my coworkers have my back? Can I trust them? So it's company support, team support, and then it's work environment. And work environment is that psychologically safe space. Can I introduce a new idea?
Right.
If I make a mistake, am I fired? Which goes back to the growth and fixed mindset of a manager too. So we have company support, team support, work environment, and then we also have the emotional health. A study just came by this morning. HR leaders, 97% said they are burnt out and stressed more than they've ever been before. You can't be happy if you're burnt out and stressed.
Definitely.
And that goes through most of the workforce. The numbers are it's really a crisis, and it's astonishing. So what's their state right now? And then we look at the stress of the job. Now there's some jobs that are just stressful. Right now accountants are all stressed because we got the deadline coming up.
Right.
Working in a healthcare system is very, very stressful. Being a teacher can be very, very stressful. But there's jobs that inherently have more stress than others. But if you have no company support, no team support, and it's not a psychologically safe space, and you're low on and you're not really a gritty person, and you don't have a strong mindset, it just piles on. It just dumps it on. So the environment, basically primarily the things you can change is company support, team support, and a work environment. Some companies are doing it really well. Most are not.
Yeah, it's and rarely you'll find somebody that's screwed up in all those areas, but all it takes is one area that's not working well, and it depends on the human being, because we're meaning-making machines, and the environment may be more important than others, but it just takes that little bit. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't think anything's changed in terms of this human contract that we have is built on trust. Can I trust my leader? Can I trust my peers? Can I trust in the processes? Can I trust myself? Because there's so many people have this notion that sooner or later people are going to figure out that I am a fraud. And people looking around them are saying, no, you're a freaking genius, but we still feel it.
When Congress, which makes our laws, has an approval rating of 13%, 12%, 11%. I mean, it's atrocious. Yeah, there's not even trust there. So even if you didn't trust your coworker, you trusted maybe management, or you trusted the local leaders. There was some trust. There was at least some pillar you can go and hug onto, tag onto that, and you go, well, at least that's the same. At least I still have trust in that. And we've lost people, when I say we, collectively, have lost trust in a lot of institutions that we really didn't even think about before. But it's pretty fragile. Nassim Taleb, going back to the financial part, Nassim Taleb talked about fragile and anti-fragile, and I love that concept. And the idea of fragility is something so rigid, it's so structured, it's so there, and that's what we grew up being, is that there were these finite structures that we can always depend on. The problem with fragility is it eventually cracks under pressure, and we need to be what he calls anti-fragile. We need to be able to bend. I talk about the anti-fragility in the terms of what Bruce Lee talked about, be water, is we live in a series of different containers. We don't know what that container is going to be, but maybe we started out in a water bottle. And then all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, that container became a martini glass. and we got poured in there, and there was way more water, and it spilled all over the place. But at least we found our container. And then all of a sudden, somebody says, "Whoops, new container. We're going to go into a juice glass, or we're going to go into a different type of a container."
And Ira, the last container we go into is the toilet, but we won't go there. So I just wanted to share. So I was kidding around years ago. I was like, you know what? I wish the Martians attacked Earth, and here's why I wanted it, is that we would come together as a human race, or Republicans and Democrats, and say, oh my God, we've got a common enemy, and we need to come together to fix this. And then the pandemic came, and I thought it would bring everybody together, but it did not. And it comes back to that trust piece. So we'll leave that for another show. But before we part company today, and this has been a fascinating conversation, how I started the show off, Ira, what makes you happy?
That's changed a lot. I love being around my grandchildren. Love spending time with them. That changes it a lot. The pandemic for me was a huge shift. I'm a workaholic. I work all the time, and I really enjoyed doing it, except when I did dentistry and I left. I loved everything about dentistry but dentistry, so I left. But I love being with my wife. I love being with my kids. I love writing. I love creating. I love all the new opportunity. I am an older baby boomer. I should be retired. I should be on a golf course. I should be doing something like that, hobby gardening. I have 2 new businesses starting, new projects. And that's what makes me happy, is seizing opportunity and helping other people. I love working with my granddaughter, who's 22, and seeing the new opportunities that she's found and the excitement she has about what she's going to do with her life and those things. And then I have a 2-year-old grandson and an 8-month-old grandson, and just watching them explore, taking the time to look at them.
What's one piece of advice, a mind hack you could share with our listeners and viewers that they could implement today and get better results?
Be water. Be like water. Be fluid. Multiple states. Depending on the environment, you can be solid. You can be gas. You can be liquid. You can take the different forms. Be water.
Brilliant. Ira, thank you so much for coming on the program. I really enjoyed this. We're going to have to do a part 2 next time because there's more ground to cover.
And everything will be different. And we are living in what we didn't talk about this, but living in the never normal. And so we'll continue to talk about it.
That will be the new normal. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. And if you're looking for more tools, go to my website at nolimitselling.com. I've got a free mind training course there that's going to teach you some insights from the world of neuro-linguistic programming, and that is the fastest way to get better results.